Friendship. Friendship again?
Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 161st live stream from the Misfit Gamer Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's episode, we have another review for your viewing pleasure. We have another one submitted from Cosmic. This is going to be a ranged weapon, a short bow called Twin-String-Bling's Compound Bow. I don't know who Twin-String-Bling is. Sounds like a creative name for somebody who likes to use bows, but we're going to find out. And we're going to find out all about their compound bow. Other updates real quick for you. The March community stream poll is up in Discord. So if you are interested in watching the community stream, it will be on Saturday, March 29th, and the poll is in Discord. Link is in chat for anybody who's not part of Discord, and you can vote to see, or you can go vote for the topic at hand for that particular community stream. And of course, as it is a new month, we now have April's community stream up and ready to go. So you can donate those channel points to get another community stream for next month. Outside of that, I don't think we have any other major updates. So we're going to be able to get into this review pretty quickly. Do you have anything for the folks?
No. I think we've been doing all right. I believe I had a couple of people over the weekend. I swear there was somebody in Discord that asked me if they could resubmit some more information for their submission, and I don't recall if I replied to them or not. But in case
I do remember
they're
them
here
asking that. I think it was
listening.
in home. I want to say it was in home brewing. I do remember someone asking whether or not they would be able to resubmit any changes.
Yes,
And I didn't want to answer for you.
but the answer to that question is yes. Normally the way I do it is I'll set it up to where when you get pinged for your item, that's like your note to get me any updates that you have as soon as possible. That way that I can make the changes before we have a review. So hopefully I should get it a full week prior to then, but
it was Cart in community chat.
Community chat.
27th. So
27th.
just a few scrolls up.
Okay.
But yeah, they just wanted to make sure because they have some updates for the Jurassic board. So maybe just direct reply to them. I don't know if they're here right now.
Okay, not a problem. I'll make
they
sure.
do not look like they're online, so I don't know if they're in chat.
Okay. Did we ever get Cosmic in the chat? I know we pinged him in the Discord.
I have not seen him, and I did not see them online, so I don't know. They were here earlier, and they knew that we were doing. I called out the item that we were going to be reviewing, so
Okay,
they should know, and they've been pinged.
We'll see what happens.
Yep. But other than that, I don't think there's any other major updates. Business as usual. What's going on, Serotonin? Hopefully I'll have some good news in the coming months. Right now it seems like there might be some not great news coming up for the schedule, but we'll find out in a couple months. I still got like 4 months to figure that out. So
Okay. All right.
So yeah, news coming, but as of right now, business as usual, no changes. So just stay tuned in the Discord and we'll keep you guys appraised. Serotonin says he should be here, so hopefully we'll give him
Who should be here?
2 minutes. Cosmic, I'm assuming. So
Oh, okay.
hopefully Cosmic will be able to show up.
Go yank him out of bed, Serotonin.
All right, give him a couple kicks or whatever. And then yeah, we'll get into this one, and then this Friday we have the still haven't figured out a good title for it, but the history of magical identification.
Oh,
that's
right.
What it means to be magical. Update on MGS merch. Well, I have a couple ideas of things that I would be interested in doing, but the biggest thing really is finding a good enough artist and figuring out how I want to translate that art into merch, right? Because it would be easy to just go on to make a couple, vector files, go into something. What is it like? I forget some of the websites that you could just like basically put the image on and then download it on anything.
Yeah.
But I found that it's better to align the design with the actual clothing in mind, or with the items in mind.
That's fair.
Instead of just have a default image. So I'm trying to figure out exactly which direction I want to go with, and then at that point, once we can get some potential artists involved and see what we can do, the hardest part about merch though is like, you know, I'm super excited that y'all want it, but it is a process and it will cost us a little bit to do merch. And it's going to be hard to justify that for like 3 people.
Sure.
Like, no offense. I love y'all, but it's one of those things. Merch does, can have a bit of a, you know, for good quality.
Isn't there a way to like set up like on demand stuff? So basically it doesn't get made until somebody orders it.
It comes down to quality. If you're okay sacrificing
so that quality, in and of itself is a sacrifice in quality going that route.
Because you got to think they have to have things in bulk that they can just basically mass print on hand and then send out. It's not like it's handmade. It's just not printed. So when you buy like a t-shirt from them, they just have blank t-shirts and a way to stamp on. So for that particular case, you're not going to get the highest quality of print. And then you have to sacrifice price. You have to pay higher price for even higher quality material, but the print will still be low quality.
Sure.
So I've looked into it before. I want to make sure that I don't just want to literally put our emotes on like a shirt and call it a day.
Yeah.
I've seen too many of that. It's not good. The really good ones actually come from good artists and actually are good brands that actually like hand print them, or at least don't just do it in mass. So they actually come out, you know, higher quality. They'll last a lot longer. Colors will be more vibrant, and we'll get some interesting options. So I just have to figure out what. Again, I don't just want our emotes. Like, it would be kind of fun to have like a coffee cup with my emote on it one day, but like realistically speaking, I don't know what our visuals are yet. Like, I haven't finalized the logo.
Yeah.
And I haven't finalized a lot of the intricacies of what Misfit Gamer Studios is visually. So
yeah,
that's the hardest other.
I totally feel that too.
So what's going on, Dark? Well, yeah, Taraskborn was one that we reviewed a while back, and then it's being resubmitted. Because we did.
So what I think is happening is along the lines, and correct me if I'm wrong, if Cart's in here or not. But what I think is happening is your suggestion of I really want Taraskborn to be an actual race.
Like the suburbs got Dragonborn?
What we yes, so something like Dragonborn. But what we reviewed wasn't that. What we reviewed was like a creature and almost a lore item, which is what we reviewed it as.
Yeah.
But that is what it is. It's actually, I believe this is actually the race.
Oh, so we're actually getting the Taraskborn.
So I don't know if Cart has a new name for what we reviewed, but that's what has been submitted most recently.
Awesome.
By them.
I'm excited for that. Okay. What's going on, Cosmic? Cosmic finally in chat.
Hey, welcome, Cosmic. Welcome.
All right. Yeah, I saw your post, Cosmic, about being able to pull off your turtle ability. I'm glad you were able to do that. I know that you were curious about whether or not the rules would allow for that. So I'm glad you were able to pull it off. It sounds like you were able to do a lot more with it than just the slip and slide that you had mentioned. But being able to go between different targets sounded pretty fun. So.
Oh, like the shells in Mario Kart.
Yeah, well, this one was more like the room was almost set up, I guess, like Cosmic equated it to like a ping pong table or not, like a pinball machine.
Oh, okay.
So literally being able to just go between the enemies and just hit him several times. I guess he did a whole bunch of stuff before initiative even started, just like damaged, or I don't know if he actually killed them all right before initiative started, but basically, yeah,
all right,
kind of a lot of. So as I said, fascinating what Cosmic's DM allows. It's, you know, sometimes fascinating to know. I would love to see like how those games unfold along the time.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Well, he can go read it if he wants. But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting use of his ability too. I would definitely allow it from a DM point of view, being able to use an ability that normally wouldn't let you move, but under the right conditions. I don't
somebody
see
like threw grease down or something like that. And
I think that was the example that I had used in my DM response to Cosmic. Is with the right conditions, there's no reason why it wouldn't. So I'm glad it was actually able to be pulled off.
Slay.
All right. Well, now that we know that we have Cosmic here, we can get right into it. We can begin our review. I can actually get rid of display capture. And I can pull up window capture. There we go.
There it is.
Alrighty. Yeah, that can happen. Especially if work or anything else that you're doing, you know, tends to shift often, but hopefully you can get some sleep, and hopefully this will hopefully we'll put you to sleep, you know. Hopefully we'll be able to help out. All right, so we can now begin today's review of the Twin-String-Bling's compound bow submitted by Kosmycpurge. This is a short bow, although it's interesting. I don't know. I've never really thought about compound bows in D&D just because they're more modernized.
Sure.
But interesting. I don't know if I would equate it to a short bow or not.
Now, see, my biggest thing is I feel like a short bow or a compound bow would be something akin to the size of a short bow with the power of a long bow.
Exactly, right? Because it has the whole, it has the mechanical benefits.
Sure.
It has the mechanical advantage, is what we would say. So, yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely short bow size, because it's like, yeah, it's somewhere between a short bow, a crossbow, and a long bow in terms of what it can actually do.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's interesting property that we're giving it out the gate. I'm also really interested in the name Twin-String-Blings. I mean, that's a very interesting name for an individual. If it is their bow in terms of
right. Because it does look like the Twin-String-Bling is possessive of the compound bow. It belongs to them.
Apostrophe S. So I'm curious if this is like an NPC or if this is like an organization, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious, like what that like using an apostrophe S.
There is quite a bit of lore.
Okay.
And background about the creation of this. So it's likely that we'll get at least some insight as to how it was created, what brought it into being, and potentially how it was named. So
okay. Well, hopefully, and maybe Cosmic can fill some in if we have anything missing.
Just as a note, this is my first attempt at doing this, but because there was a pretty decent description, I just decided on a whim to go on a little exploration and look for an image. This image did not come with the submission. This is something that I found and thought that matched at least somewhat to the description that was given. So
all right, so Cosmic will have to give us
tell me what you think, tell me if you like it, don't like it, whatever. It doesn't have to go with it, but I figured why not take a gander and see what's up.
All right, so real quick, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the other bows in 5e real quick.
So there were some elements of the properties that I removed because they were standard for a short bow. So if you want to look up the range and the damage for a short bow, that will be what this.
Yeah. Okay. So simple ranged weapons. We have a light crossbow and a short bow, doing 8d or a d8 and a d6 respectively. They both, so a short bow and a crossbow have the same range. Interesting. Gotcha. Hand crossbow does a d6. Heavy crossbow does a d10. And a longbow does a d8. These are martial ranged weapons. This is considered a simple weapon, which, yeah, it would. So it's under the short. So under the short bow, it acts as a simple weapon. Okay. Just trying to look at the difference between what the other bows actually do.
Yeah.
In this particular case, because yeah, with a compound bow, I wouldn't call it a heavy crossbow. It's interesting that the longbow, I can understand why it's a martial because of the draw weight. So yeah, I can understand why it's a simple, because if a longbow and a heavy crossbow are both considered martial weapons due to, say, their weight, one's physically heavy and mechanical to use,
sure,
whereas the other's more physically demanding to utilize and to knock. So if those are considered martial, and even a hand crossbow is martial, more for the, I guess,
technical aspect of it.
The more technical of a
You have
pistol.
to reload and stuff like that.
Yeah, whereas if you think about a short bow versus a light crossbows aren't as technical to reload. They're, I guess, the same technicality as a heavy crossbow, but still easier.
So wait, a hand crossbow is martial, but a light crossbow isn't?
Correct. And I think the reason why I would think is technically, I mean, if you think about a pistol versus a rifle, rifles are technically easier to handle because you have more stability with them.
Sure.
So you could say that a hand crossbow is more technical in terms of firing single-handedly, takes a little bit more technical in practice, whereas the light crossbow, I guess you could say, it's lighter in terms of carrying it, but it's also more. It's easier than a bow to hit your target. I don't know. I'm trying to justify why they would divide those two specifically. You would think it would be the hand crossbow would be the simple weapon. You know what I mean? But maybe they made it a martial weapon because then you could do dual wielding of some sort, and it would account for that.
Perhaps.
So in this particular case with a compound bow, yeah, I guess in a sense it would be like, in one sense it's simpler because it is easier to use, though it is slightly more complicated. But yeah, okay. I don't really see it being a problem being a simple weapon.
Sure.
I can't really find an argument against it. Again, I think it's because I'm thinking too much about being a compound bow. If I just were to preface it as a short bow, it's fine. But I'm trying to think of how would I equate a compound bow in, like, how would I actually make that?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, there's nothing stopping compound bows from existing in High Point for what it is that they are and what it is that they do. There's nothing.
If someone could figure out how to create it, for sure. Like,
Interesting.
I don't disagree with the concept of a compound bow, because there's really, there are ways to get it done without some of the modern parts.
Yeah.
Trying to see if I can find a compound bow in actual D&D at all. Yeah, I don't know. If I thought about it any longer, I could probably make an argument for it being more martial. But I'm okay calling it a short bow for now.
Yeah.
Because it does have a smaller form factor. It has the power of a longbow without having the draw weight, having the ease of it. So yeah, I'm okay calling it a simple weapon for now. What's going on, Red Lego? Would a compound short bow weigh more than a standard short bow? Yes, 100% it would. That's why I'm debating on whether or not it would be martial due to its extra weight. I don't know. It's a tough call. But again, if they're calling a light crossbow simple when a hand crossbow is martial, I can see both arguments. So I'm okay letting this be a short bow.
I also wouldn't have a problem with either one of two things. Just saying that this compound bow is got the stats of a short bow, but is considered a martial weapon. And even though short bows are simple, right? Or just creating a category called compound bow, right? Like you have a long bow, you have a short bow, you have a compound bow, right? And that compound bow is a martial weapon, and it has a lot of the similar properties as a short bow, but also I wouldn't mind the damage die going up,
Oh yeah, I mean, with the compound bow, I could easily see, based on these other ones I was looking at, a D6 and a D8. For a crossbow, and a heavy crossbow is a D10. I would totally give this a D10.
D10.
A compound bow, 100%. I would absolutely allow a compound bow to be around the same size as a heavy crossbow in terms of poundage for shot.
Fair enough. You think it would outdo a longbow pretty easily?
Not in distance.
But I mean in power. In power and damage.
Yeah, that's why I think it would act more like a heavy crossbow, but probably give you I think it would just act like a heavy crossbow, really. It would be a short, and that's the other thing you could do. You could basically give it heavy crossbow stats for a short bow size. But then again, that would be a lot of damage for a simple weapon. So again, I could see arguments for both sides. It's one of those ones where I'd probably have to do a lot more. I'd probably have to sit down and do some math.
Sure.
I'd probably really have to look at real life examples of how a compound bow compares to a short bow and a real long bow. And that's what I would do. Personally, I would actually go out of my way to look at examples, go to the YouTube videos, look at research that shows side-by-side firing, and then I would judge. Because you really got to ask yourself what's the difference between simple and martial? That's really what you have to define first. And I don't know off the top of my head what 5th edition says about the differences.
That's a very fair point. I'm not even sure what distinguishing marks that they make, other than just certain race or certain classes have, what do you call it, proficiencies in simple, and some have both simple and martial. But it usually starts at simple, and then the more advanced you get, you have access to martial.
Okay, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious if I could see anything, find anything here about the differences. Interesting. Okay, so quick little thing I was able to find between the differences on core mechanics. It looks like one of the, I guess, like in-game examples to split the difference apart. Simple does not require specialized training, while martial does.
Okay.
Now, how that equates to your character.
What do we mean by specialized training? Like
that's why I think it's just more of a lore aspect. Like, if you have a martial weapon, that's why like fighters, rangers, people who are trained get martial weapons, whereas like wizards who aren't trained in combat get simple weapons. You can be handed this weapon and not need to know how to use it. I get being
handed a club and like you don't need training. You swing the club, you hit the thing, right? You know.
Yeah, because clubs, daggers, javelins, light crossbows, mace, quarterstaff, short bow, spear. These are things you can pick up. You don't need a lot of strength, and you get the purpose of it, right? Whereas they're saying things like the battle axe, the longsword, the rapier, the great axe, the great sword, the heavy crossbow. These things take training. You didn't just pick it up off the street and utilize it. Now, granted, in game, what does that mean? Just the simple restrictions of class, right? That's we only see it in terms of what classes can use what weapons, but I think that's their reasoning is fighters have training, so therefore they can use weapons that would require training to use a weapon. Whereas all of these other people, they can pick up a stick and beat someone with a stick. But that doesn't mean that they're going to parry with a sword, right? They can pick up a sword and swing it, but that doesn't mean that they're going to parry. That doesn't mean that they're going to be able to defend themselves. That means that they're going to swing a sword at probably someone who's defenseless, but not someone who's actually trained, right? So I get that. I feel like I get that as a better example, which would push me to make the compound bow probably more martial. Because I do feel a compound bow, well, easier is probably still more along the lines of a trainer. So if we're going purely off the word compound bow, I might make a better argument for martial.
Yeah.
Because there is
I get where they're coming from with simple, because even both short swords and long swords are martial weapons, so they require training. Like, I would say most bladed weapons would require some sort of training to make sure you don't hit yourself. I can understand a staff, I can understand a club, I guess maybe even a dagger, but okay. Yeah, I feel like I would agree. I think that this would be something that requires like a decent amount of training, you know. And yeah. I can understand why a short bow isn't. Like a long bow is.
I totally understand why a short bow is considered intuitive. It doesn't take a lot of strength, so the average person can pick it up and get the gist of it really quickly. But a long bow, you don't just pick that up and fire it once and get the gist of it. You need to be trained on how to draw it, how to hold it, how to hurt yourself. Like, you can snap your arm with a short bow and live. You know what I mean? You can take skin off if you hit yourself with a long bow. Like, if you have that, if you scrape your arm with a long bow, you can take skin off.
Sure.
So that's how I feel, right? It's one of those things where having fired and handled many of these weapons, I totally understand, right? I can pick up most weapons and flail around and against an unarmed assailant, I'd probably win most of my fights. But putting up against anybody who has any like actual amount of training, I'd much rather have a weapon that doesn't take a whole lot of understanding, right? Like something that I feel more confident in. I'm not going to pick up a katana.
Yeah.
Even though I own them, even though I know how to handle them, if I'm going into an actual battle, I'm picking up something that's way more intuitive to fight with than something that I know needs skill. And that's where I think that.
Fair.
And again, because there's no other way that they're representing it other than which classes use what weapons. So
yeah.
So I'm not mad that we're using short bow. I think it would be better to call it a
martial.
We have a rarity. Moving on, we have a rarity of rare, and we have a weapon bonus of +2. So that makes it magical then, a +2, or is that just a?
So
bonus?
I believe that when we're talking 5th edition and we say you have a +2 weapon, that innately means that it is magical. It's a magical addition to
that's
the
what
weapon.
okay that's what I've always assumed is when you say something that has like a magical attack and damage bonus, I equate that to that is its magical bonus. Like it is a +2 magical bow.
Sure.
Therefore that +2 is what adds the damage. Cosmic has unlocked the feat challenging the norm. Okay, so we have a magical bow, and then it does require attunement. Cosmic does like his attunement.
Of course.
It needs to be attuned by an artificer, a ranger, an archery fighter, a druid, or a monk. I'm not really getting an idea of what this particular collaboration of classes signifies.
Yeah, to be honest, like I kind of get artificer and ranger, and maybe even fighter, but druid or monk, like they seem to be very untrained when it comes to a lot of things. Like not untrained, but like if I'm envisioning like a monk picking up this weapon, like, it's gonna feel a little bit odd to me.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like I can see them using like a regular bow of some sort, but a compound bow, even a crossbow.
Same with the druid. I could feel like a druid feels a little bit off, but again, I'm like,
yeah.
What I try to do when I think of attunement is I try to look at, is there something that brings them all together, like a common denominator, or is it based in the lore, right? Like, is it only because it's created by a deity who has certain types of followers, right? So I can understand that, right? It's only meant for my people. But when you look at what's the common denominator here, I mean, the artificer probably because it's mechanical, ranger and archery fighter because it's a bow, but those two don't link, right? The artificer only seems available because it's a non-standard semi-mechanical bow. So that's the only reason why I can see why the artificer's there, but that doesn't. To me, it doesn't make sense why that links to the ranger or archery fighter. And then, like you said, the druid or monk also don't seem to mix with any of them, outside of the fact that I could see a druid being an archer, maybe. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't really connect those. And then I try to wonder, so what are the classes that we're not filling in here, right? So it's not for wizards, it's not for sorcerers,
paladins,
it's not for paladins or clerics. And then I try to understand, like, so what makes them not
qualified.
So until we get the lore, we won't really know.
Sure.
But yeah, at first glance, I'm not really sure where the attunement's taking us. I do know Cosmic really does like attunement, but I'm not sure it's always needed. So we'll see how the lore builds upon that. And then you said that this image that we're about to see is not the one that Cosmic submitted, but one that you found.
This is one that I found. So Cosmic, tell me what you think about it when you see it, how you feel about it. To me, it felt very much mechanical. And when we hear a little bit of the description in a little bit, I feel like it kind of goes with it. You can kind of see the 2 strings.
Yeah, I see the 2 strings here. It's 2 strings, but it does seem to be one knocking pin.
And so I don't.
That's interesting though that you found that, and I do kind of like how you can see like this kind of goes into this mechanical arm that kind of seems to pivot here and pivot here. So you see these like pivot points. So I see how like the compound is supposed to work here. So I kind of like it. The little spikes in the middle here are very interesting.
I don't know why they're there or what. It was just, it looked kind of cool. All right, it looked kind of cool. I was like, this kind of fits the vibe. That's This is the energy that I was going with. So,
Yep.
you tell me how you feel about it.
All right.
But-
So he says it's decent. Decent. All
love
right.
it.
All right. Well, let's move on. So, oh yeah, and we have a note here.
Yes.
All right. So let's move on to the description. All right. For this bow, long ago, an artificer that once regretted not training as a ranger crafted this bow as an experiment. It was an attempt to hone and perfect a common weapon with their mechanical and technical knowledge into something more useful in day-to-day life. Though he passed before ever finishing his work, a descendant of the artificer found their ancestors' experimental bow and their notes on the project. Using their own magic in combination with a blood ritual known only to their family line, they were able to finish crafting this short bow into what it is today. The bow's curse. Okay, this bow has a curse as well. The bow's curse is due to the blood ritual used to gain the ancestral guidance needed to finish the bow's construction. Okay, that's... Okay, starting to piece the picture.
Okay.
Okay, so the blood wasn't used to make it. The blood was used to get knowledge to make it. But by doing that, it got cursed. Gotcha. Okay. And then
Interesting.
this bow's brass frame could be easily mistaken for gold, but the multi-string bow's intricate gear-like attachments and other mechanisms create a striking visual, compound bow design. Most notably, the secondary string woven from the essence of the spirits themselves as a lingering effect of the blood ritual's magic, ectoplasmic string.
That
all right.
is something I wish I could have found for the image, but there wasn't like an ectoplasmic because I'm assuming based upon what this looks like is like there's one regular string and one ectoplasmic string, and that's where the two strings are coming from. That's kind of what it sounds like, but.
So whenever I read things like this, I'm always curious which came first, the lore or the mechanic. Because I read this and I'm like, okay, was this lore built to explain what the bow can do, or did the lore come first and therefore the bow was created from the lore? Or again, is the lore,
I see what you're saying.
Like, because that's one thing that I struggle with.
Like kind of like when we're doing image to item. Like
Yes.
we is what's happening coming as a result of the lore, or are we creating lore to make sense of what we've
because
created?
Cosmic's, we know that Cosmic really likes attunement, which again I'm still wondering why that we need an attunement here. But as I read like the fact that it's going to have a curse, right? But the curse is tied to the blood ritual. So I can't help but wonder which one came first during the creation process. Was it the fact that there was a blood ritual and therefore you feel like it needed to be cursed because that's part of the lore, and therefore there's like continuity for like the setting situation, because I know Cosmic has a very in-depth setting?
Yes.
Or is it that you wanted it to be cursed and therefore the lore had to explain the curse?
So you needed a blood ritual or something.
And so, yeah.
Dark.
And I'm not saying it because it's a good background for it, but I think what Cosmic you had joked about is, I know that this doesn't, it's not a lot in terms of words, right? It's not like it's 4 pages of lore.
Sure.
But this gives us a lot without giving us much. Like in terms of, it gives me so much about what it was made, how it was made. But like for me to take this in as a DM, there's a lot of layers and details here that don't really answer anything, right? So it was created but unfinished. Then the ancestor found the notes and then wanted to finish the project, but then couldn't. So then needed ancestral knowledge, then needed a blood ritual to get the knowledge, to then finish it, but then it got cursed. So you know what I mean? Like there's so many layers. Like it's not that it's a bad story, but for handing it off to to everybody.
Right.
It's not an easily streamlined or easily understandable one. There's just a lot of layers that don't really go anywhere, especially in the terms of like, how does that directly relate? The only thing that relates directly to the bow is an artificer and the fact that it's a bloodline caused the curse. Those are the only two things I really pull out of here that directly relate to the bow, right? So that's where, again, when it comes to something like this, in setting would be perfect. Like this is a great multi-layered setting specific type of lore.
Sure.
But for something that's going to be available to the masses when you kind of want to like put it in a book and be like, hey, would you like to try this in your world? This is that one where it's like I would almost just clean it up because it's almost just too much going on here.
I kind of get what you're saying. There have been other descriptions and lore things that we've had in some of our other submissions that they give you the pieces that allow you to run with it. And I feel like some of these pieces are ones that don't necessarily allow you to run with it, but they kind of make you need to give a reason why X, Y, and Z happened. Because like right now, I'm be like, okay, yes, there was a blood ritual, but how did the blood ritual work? How did this blood ritual end up cursing the thing? Like there will be questions that I'll need to answer in case my players want to go investigate X, Y, and Z that I'll have to come up with. Why did the original artificer not complete it? Right?
Yeah.
What was the reason why this particular ancestor wanted to finish it? Were they alive when they were originally working on it? Did they work on it
these
together?
are a lot of specifics that I may not be ready to answer versus, an old artist, having just an old artificer, having created this would have been enough. Having this have been found and finished would have been enough, right?
Sure.
The blood part of it, like the blood ritual and the curse would have been enough. Like any one of those pieces would have been enough to be a good background lore. But all of it together just makes it a very complex backstory that feels like it belongs in a very specific setting.
And it's like, I need all of those pieces to make this be a thing because they're in the original lore. So,
yeah.
No,
so that's why I can't just help but wonder, like, and I'm curious, Cosmic, if you remember, I know that you said you wrote this a while ago, so you don't have like all of like the specifics in your head. But I'm just curious if you remember, did you decide that you wanted this thing to be cursed first and then filled in how it got cursed? Or when you made the lore, did you decide because there's a blood ritual, it should be cursed? Because yeah, as much as curse items are nice, I always like them to make sure that there's a purpose for it. And so I'm wondering if this is a setting specific situation where whenever blood's used, the curse is involved. You know what I mean? So kind of trying to just understand like the direction of how we're creating this thing.
And maybe that's like again, this would be definitely setting specific, but that would be an interesting side effect of blood magic or something like that. Is like anytime you use blood magic, usually it curses whatever it's
forbidden magic. So therefore there's always the backfire of a curse. I'm totally down if that's like the thing, right? But without that, it's just, again, it just adds more complexity to the backstory when we could have shortened that, that situation up and made so many layers of the ancient, the ancestor, the rich, like there's just so much there that I would like to either understand more about where it's coming from or shorten it up so that I could easily
Cosmic made the lore first and tried to theme the mechanics around it.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's not a bad thing to do either. Like understanding, what happens and then what comes of it is typically what I do in High Point. It's usually, the story first, and the mechanics kind of follow suit.
We love the lore, everything to make sense.
Totally get how that works. Okay, so moving on to the effects now. Let's see here. When the weapon is obtained, it is also found with an old and degraded leather quiver, including 1d12 plus 2 arrows of low quality. Also, roll a 1d4 plus 2 to determine when Phantasmal Arrow will be triggered. Okay, and then we're going to get Phantasmal Arrow. Okay, so Phantasmal Arrow. This arrow will be triggered every X time the bow is fired, where X is the number rolled when the bow was found. If a 4 is rolled when the bow is triggered, every 4th arrow fired. When this feature triggers, a second phantasmal arrow will be fired from the bow alongside the initial shot with the same attack roll. The second arrow deals a flat d6 as either force damage or necrotic damage, player's choice. Force damage, when this damage type is chosen, it cannot be resisted. Ignores force resistance and then necrotic. When this is chosen, it cannot be healed until the end of a long rest or healed by greater restoration spell. If the attack that triggers Phantasmal Arrow has advantage, then on a hit, the arrow deals an additional 1d6 of the chosen damage type to the target. This effect does stack with critical hits. Only Phantasmal Arrow damage count as magical. Okay, That's a lot.
Okay, I think I'm following.
Yes, I'm following, but I have a feeling that this is one of those situations where this is asking a lot from everybody to keep track of. Like the moment I pick it up, and it's not even and again, I mean, first off, it's the moment I pick it up, not even the moment it's attuned, which would make more sense is this happens on attunement, right? So first off, I would say that if you're gonna stick with this 1d4 roll, I would,
as a DM, to be honest, I don't think it would matter if I just said when you attune to it or when you pick it, because either way, it's just the one number. But it only matters when you actually use it and or fire it.
The reason why I would say for attunement though is because every single person that touches it have to have their own number. I would just say for attunement, for ease of a DM, I only have to pay attention to the fact that you're attuned to it right now. What's your number? If you de-attune to it and you attune to it, roll a number. That's your number. If you detune to it and you go back to it, you roll a new number.
See, my thought process is I'm gonna do exactly that anyways, because even if, like, the way this is written, if somebody touches it, you're not gonna get any of its magical abilities without being attuned to it. Right. So it's just gonna be a regular bow and arrow for you unless you attune to it.
And that's what I mean by, like, it doesn't even matter about rolling until you've attuned to it, because you wouldn't get to it. So that's why I just, for me, cleanly,
sure,
I would just say when you attune to it, make the roll, because for me as a DM, just be super easy to pay attention to only when one person needs that number. But that's just me. That's how I would.
No, that makes sense.
The second thing, so I don't mind this phantasmal arrow. I don't mind this as like a special ability. It's kind of, it's unique. It's not really, because it has nothing to do. See, again, this is really weird though. We're talking about two different items now. This is a set. This is an arrow and a quiver, because the quiver has phantasmal arrow, as far as I'm understanding.
So I thought it was the bow.
So when the weapon is obtained, it's also found with an old degraded leather quiver, including these arrows. Also, so maybe that those two things should be separated then, in terms of like listing them out, because it sounds like the phantasmal arrow is coming with the quiver.
See, I believe, I'm pretty sure the quiver is just so that you have some arrows.
Yeah, and that's I would just keep that separate, because going from you find a quiver with arrows to also roll a d4 and phantasmal arrow happens, I'm thinking it's every fourth arrow I pull, not every fourth arrow I fire. So just for my sake, I would even just put that up with the description. Literally just move that sentence right up at the description. Is right at the end, it says when this bow is obtained, you find a thing. And then we go into effects.
Okay.
Because to me, that sounds more like the description than it does, or even up here on the properties. When you find this bow, it will come with a quiver of X number of arrows.
Interesting.
I'm totally fine with that, because then that's just part of the package, but then it doesn't confuse me on the effects. I don't know if chat agrees with me. That's just, again, how I read things. I immediately assumed that was
I could totally see it in the description. I could also see it as like a footnote in the effect, because, you know, anything for me that has to do with like mechanics, I feel like should go in like the effect. So I will say this: the way this is laid out is not the way Cosmic sent it to me.
Okay, yeah.
So I reordered a lot of things because there was some lore aspects that were, some was at the top, some was at the bottom. So I kind of tried to bring all of that into like one condensed section. I do very much agree that having it there, I do believe that was in that line. Like that line was set up like that. I'm trying to look through
no
here.
worries. I'm just trying to look at it for future, you know, just again, educational purposes. When I read two sentences like that, it's hard not to assume they immediately link together.
Sure.
Without realizing that they could be talking about two different things. So maybe a fault of my own. But okay, cool. So it's found with a quiver, but the effect is that whenever you get it, or again, I would say just whenever you attune to it, you roll a d4 plus 2. So that means it's a minimum every third round, up to every sixth round, every sixth fire, every third or sixth. So every third, fourth, fifth, or sixth time you fire, this will fire a phantasmal arrow. So I don't mind that the bow fires the phantasmal arrow. I kind of like that that's the spectral string that kind of basically adds it. I don't mind that out the gate. I don't mind that it's an additional shot and not a replacement shot. I don't mind that.
Okay.
And I don't mind the damage. So I'll those are the things I don't mind.
Okay.
I'm not sure how I feel about it ignoring resistances. Like the force damage ignoring resistance and the necrotic damage not being able to be healed. I feel like that's pretty powerful, but I think you said that +3 is like the max in 5th edition.
Yes.
So as a +2, I'm okay with it, because if +3 is the max, then yeah, this is probably pretty powerful to do that at a +2. You know what I mean? So I'm not a fan of that that type of power just coming from the weapon, but I get it. Like for 5th edition leveling purposes, it makes sense.
I will also say it's for me, it's slightly more okay because number one, this is every time it's fired, not every time it hits.
Correct.
So also, it is on a set interval, which means I don't get to choose, which means I have to work around it.
Yeah.
So it's putting barriers in place for the players to be unnecessarily spammy, right?
Yeah.
Like if I really want to do it to this guy, but he goes down before or whatever. So my thing is, I totally agree with you on all of that. My only dislike, really, well, my two big dislikes, because it's complex and it's a lot of steps, a lot of remembering, and a lot of if then this, like sure.
We've talked about this before, is when you're in the thick of it, anything that takes time. So my thing is, first of all, the way it chooses the intervals, I honestly can imagine players forgetting this all the time, especially if it's like every 6th shot.
Forgetting that they have it?
Because like, again, it's like you fire 2 shots this match, like this combat, you fire 2 shots the next combat, then you fire 1 shot the next combat. That's 3 different combats. Are you going to remember that your first shot this next combat? I mean, you could have it. I know you could have it on your sheet.
Sure.
I know you could have a tally thing, but I'm just saying that we've talked about how fast combat can be, how quick combat can end. My biggest thing is that having it on a rotational trigger seems unnecessarily complex, when 5e we either could just do it on a X number of, like you said, like you could choose it when to do it, which is more in line, I think, with 5e.
Yes.
Or we could trigger it off of a roll, like not necessarily like a crit roll, but like how something's like things recharge on a certain die roll. We could have it do something similar to that, where it activates on a certain hit, so it's not controllable. Because I agree with you, I think it actually does better as is when it's not fully controllable. Personally, I just feel that the complexity of keeping track of when it fires, while it makes sense, like especially in a video game mindset, like I get the mechanic, I don't think that the tabletop setting is the way to deploy it, because I think that it's just going to end up being a ticking mark that's more, it's just unnecessarily complicated. I don't think it's undoable. I just don't think it's the easiest way of going about it.
I definitely agree it's not the easiest way. To be honest, I'm almost slightly in favor for it, just because it's super unique. It is a different way to do things like that I haven't seen before. And the biggest, I would say, I agree that it is another thing to keep track of. And depending on what your main class is for this thing, you might already have spell slots, you might already have key points, you might already have whatever the heck else it is to keep track of. But I would say it's not much harder to keep track of than key points, right? Just because I get a number of key points equal to my level, right? Mm-hmm. Which changes every level, but I also can use those throughout and in between combats. I also get some back when I do a short rest if I meditate. I also potentially, when I get high enough level, can get some back when I start combat. So there's a lot of things that will play with that. And like, again, it's a lot for you to keep track of as you're going through things. But I would say this is something to where it's like, okay, I just have to keep track of when my last thing was. So it's like, fills up, starts over, fills up, starts over, fills up. I feel like that's, yes, it can be annoying, and depending on if you have a bunch of stuff already too, it might not be the best. But
Like I said, my biggest, it's not like it doesn't work. I just feel like it's unnecessarily complex for
sure.
the tracking mechanism of I picked it up, I rolled this number, now I got to keep track of that number whenever I fire it.
Now that is, you roll it when you find it, and then you have that number forever, like the entire time.
It doesn't really say. It just says that you have that number now, which is why I would say it should always be done at attunement, just flat, because that way, no matter if you've attuned to it before or not, it's just always rolled right when you attune,
Sure.
and there's only ever one number anyone ever has to remember.
Now I'm curious. This is just, what do you think? And I let's actually ask Cosmic, since he's here and he can answer. Is this something to where, if it is, this is how many this weapon, when it was created, does, period, end of story, and you're just discovering what the answer is when you attune to it because you just found it? Or
Is it different for each person?
Is it literally changing for every person that attunes to it?
Yes, and
Right?
that's totally fair, right? That could totally be if it's no one's touched this in 1,000 years, and you're just happen to be the first person to touch it. So
Because then,
I'm just having you roll for it, and that's just always been its number. Then I get where you're coming from. Then that could just always be, again, the first person to find it is just
Cosmic said the first. So that's that. If that's the case, then the first person to find this, they roll, and no matter who else attunes to it, they're using the same number. So you have to remember that one number for everyone ever.
So honestly, in that case, why even have it as a roll? Like, just choose it as honestly, just like make it like, I would just choose at that point.
Just decide.
You know what I mean? Because to have one person, and again, because you're basically saying like, hey, here's something you can have in your realm, in your game, but only one person's going to decide how it works.
Whoever finds it first is going to,
and then you have to write that number down at that point. What, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, honestly, I kind of like the idea that it changes with the attunement more. Like, every person who attunes with it has a different, number it fires on. But I like dynamicism like that, right? I'm all about having numbers change. So yeah, if this is a one-time number, I'm honestly not sure what the purpose of the roll is. Outside,
fair enough.
It's like, I get if you want it to be like random, but if it's only going to be random one time ever in all of existence,
I'll say, if it is going to change with the person that attunes to it, it feels like that would be hard to make sense lore wise, unless it was dependent upon the person that's attuned to it. Meaning, like the number is your proficiency modifier, or the number it's associated with the person.
I just assume that when you attune to things, it's your level of like connection, your level of relationship.
Okay.
That's why I don't mind it adjusting. Is it's not so much that it still has the ability to do it, but if, like, let's say you have a much stronger resonance with it, you'll be able to fire it off.
It'll happen. Okay, fair enough.
Or you could call
I can get down with
you
that.
could say that you're its source of power to recharge.
Sure.
So if you're a weaker source of energy, if it can't siphon off of you, it takes longer to recharge. So there are ways that I would be okay in lore saying why it would change with each person. But yeah, Cosmic, if you're gonna go with the interesting aspect of it just has a single number, to be honest, I would just decide the number ahead of time. You know what I mean? It's so much easier, again, from a DM point of view, to just, and unless, of course, this is a spectacle, right? If this is going to be something that they've adventured to, they've journeyed to, that's some big spectacle, and you're going to make it kind of like a cutscene, like we've talked about, like a big cinematic, and this role like really matters, like, and it's a big ordeal. It kind of feels like, again, why roll for something that is just a one-time choice? You know what I mean? It kind of, I want to make sure that roll feels that important, but it kind of just goes, oh, I found this thing. Okay, cool. It's always just fired every third round, guys. Like,
Sure.
What was the roll purpose for? At that point, what I would do, honestly, here's what I would do. If I were giving this one to the DM, I'd say, and when your players find it, you roll the D4 plus 2.
Sure.
As a DM. And you keep that from them until they fired it that many times. And then
I do kind of like
let
that
them
better.
know that. So if you wanted to keep it as part of the cinematic where the DM rolls the D4 and doesn't tell the party. And at the time they fired it, they goes, oh, by the way, an extra arrow went out. And then you do that 2 or 3 more times. And they're like, what's going on with this extra arrow? And it's like, by the way, it's every 4th shot.
Yeah.
And then you just give them that knowledge. So you don't have to keep telling them, by the way, do an extra shot. That's how I would probably present it, because then it's actually bigger of a discovery. But again, if you just tell them, hey, roll a D4, okay, that's the number it rolls on. What was the, like, it just feels like it was a wasted roll. You know what I mean?
So my other question is, at the beginning, you're determining how many it's going to be for the entire time you're attuned to it. Are you also doing that for the force damage and necrotic damage, or are you making that choice every single time the duplicate occurs? Every single time Phantasmal Arrow is triggered, are you choosing force damage or necrotic damage? Or is it you choose once and that's what you get for your attunement with this bow?
Yeah, it doesn't actually say, it does say player's choice, but yeah, it doesn't say each time or one-time choice. Interesting.
Yeah.
I would assume each time. Hecate just got back. I think lots of effects for weapons are either have the damage when hit due to an extra d6 force damage or necrotic damage, like Frostbane, or have it do it when it crits, does the damage plus the crit weapon, or word like that, and easier to understand. And yeah, whether, just having it like trigger on certain events instead of having it like, every so often. Like I said, when it comes down to how combat typically works in 5th edition, I just feel like this is going to get lost in the background, especially if you have multiple weapons. But if you're not going to fire 3, 4, 5, 6 times every combat, what's the likelihood that it gets lost in translation or just kind of lost in the background? So, and what happens if you don't use it? Does it automatically fire? So is the DM responsible for guaranteeing that it fires every time, or is it optional? And therefore, if you miss, do you have to wait another 6? Or if you waited 5 turns and you're like, oh, 2 turns ago, my thing recharged, do I still have it, or do I have to wait another 6?
So the way I understand that this reads is it triggers on that interval period, which is again a part of the out of control aspect, the kind of limitations that you have to strategize with.
And if it's always going to be, then that seems like it's more on the DM than the player to remember.
Yes, but also like if and to take from Magic the Gathering a little bit, like if you miss your trigger, you miss your trigger type deal. You know what I mean? Like if you could have done something to help you out, but you didn't do it because you forgot or whatever the case may be, then
no going back and being like, hey, by the way, all of those arrows, they were doing extra damage that I didn't say. He should be dead by now.
I've been a barbarian and totally forgot to add my rage damage when I was raging and stuff like that.
On like like on a roll, you know what I mean? Like,
but I would say like
I wouldn't even mind this basically being like in a sense, because it's a D4 plus 2. Why not just every time you fire, roll a D6, and on the roll of a 5 or 6, the spectral thing triggers?
I personally like the consistency a little bit better, because I could go like 3 or 4 combats without it triggering potentially. Like
you could also go every shot.
Exactly. But like having that consistency, that reliability, like I know it's going to trigger on these particular intervals. Like that to me would be.
I mean, even triggering on like what if it triggered on a roll of a 17 or higher? You know what I mean? Something a little bit easier than a crit, but still.
Yes,
but like it's still not exact. It's still not like consistent, but it would be.
And I honestly don't know which one I would like more, because it could happen to where every time it triggers, I just end up missing.
Yeah.
Every time it triggers, I just end up missing. And so that could potentially
because you don't get the choice. And what if you forget it's going to trigger and your DM doesn't, and you go after the minion and hit the minion and just overpower, and you're like, I didn't. Or you're like, I need to help you, buddy, teammate who's about to die.
Which is again,
but this is supposed to be for the BBEG, and he's too far.
That is what I like about it. I like it forcing you to strategize. Do I save my buddy, or do I do big damage on the BBEG? Like I want this. That's why I like the fact that it happens regularly, so where you don't have full control over it, because of how powerful the potential arrows are going to be. Like getting rid of, like, is it important for you to not resist this damage? Is it important for you to not be able to heal? Is it important for this to go down for you, or is it more important for me to go do this other thing? So like I'm here for that strategy. I like that aspect of what this kind of forces you to do when it comes to those consistent intervals. Like that's why I like this and how it's so different from the way a lot of other things work. But again, it's like when I look at how much I genuinely, because we always talk about like, do I want to play with this? When I listen to this, when I hear how this is being presented to me, is this something like I'm kind of excited to try that out? And with this in mind, I am excited to try it out, but I'm running it through a couple of times in my mind. I'm kind of on the fence on like which one is gonna feel worse. Is it gonna feel worse when I just miss every single time that third or fourth shot comes around? Or is it gonna feel worse if I never hit the 17 when I need it?
Right.
Or it's I
or
never
six,
hit the,
or you never roll the 6.
I never
right.
get the thing that I need when I need it, and I'm like always rolling and it's always missing. I really want this to work. I really want this to, and it just,
and it would be too not cliche, but it would be too standard to say, you know, once per, you know, every 3 rounds or something, you get to choose. Like one shot for every so many, you know, like you being able to have that much control is almost too much like every other ability. Right?
I mean,
it's not different.
yeah,
It's almost not enough to basically be like you can fire a spectral arrow, you know, or you have to fire a spectral arrow, you know, like once every 3 rounds or something. But again, it's like you know what I mean? It's just more of what seems more controllable to both the player and the DM. Like what's more trackable?
Yeah.
Because that my only argument is trackability.
Sure.
My only argument, because you know me, I play in 2nd edition. Complexity is not. I'm not I'm not afraid of I mean, I play with Thaco, for God's sakes. Like, I don't mind unique and complex things. My only hesitation is for both the player and the DM to agree on how this is tracked. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just a complexity that I wonder, is it going to take away from its effect? And is there a better way that you could pull this off while taking away the agency, right? I like the fact that it takes away the agency and the player control of it. I just don't know if tracking it is the exchange I want to make.
The only other thing I could think of, and this might make it worse or better, but I feel like it would feel better from a player's perspective, is say you end up rolling a 3, right? And that's your number. It happens every 3rd round. It would be a situation where once you use this arrow, you don't get it back for 3 rounds. And that's it. So it's basically like you don't necessarily have to use it. Or say if you don't use it or you forget to use it, it doesn't go away. It's not like you lose it. It's just that it sits there until it's like, all right, phantasmal arrow, boom. I can't use it for another 3 rounds. So it's like
every 3rd shot it charges your phantasmal arrow. You choose after that way to use it.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so, you know, I would also say, just because of how it works, you got to choose before you shoot. And if you miss, you miss.
Yeah.
But like, it's not one of those things where I want it to be a phantasmal arrow after I find out that it hits, because you're drawing it back and you're letting it go.
No, I got you. So yeah. I think my only concern is just when I play it through my mind, having both player and DM need to track how many shots have been fired before this will pull off.
Sure.
Is my only concern. It just feels like with how long combat can already take and how much complexity can already be in it,
Sure.
I feel like this is adding one more thing that at the end of the day, people would rather not have to do. Sure. That's again, I don't mind the ability. I don't mind the damage. It's just the tracking of when it goes off is my only hesitation.
It's definitely another piece to the puzzle that you gotta mess with.
And I think it's more of, again, I know a lot of players from the second 2E mindset that would love this. I'm just wondering how it would affect 5e players, right? Because it's just not something you normally attack. You don't normally track how many attacks you've made. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then again, think about a fighter. Like
multi-attack.
You could be doing this a couple times in a round. Like there's just a lot going on there. But other than that, the other thing I wanted to put a pin in, and I wanted how you feel about this, because this is, again, it's already doing some great stuff. It's already doing extra damage, right? As a second arrow on top of whatever you're doing.
Now,
So it's doing an extra d6 on top of your own arrow, right? So it's two arrows. It's basically a secondary arrow. So
Yes.
here's the other part of this whole thing that I was hesitant on. So if the attack that triggers the arrow has advantage.
Okay.
So again, think about the complexity here of it has to be out of however many shots you have, you have to now be aware, not just when Phantasmal Arrow triggers, but when it triggers, did you have advantage?
Mm-hmm.
And if you had advantage, you get another damage die on your Phantasmal Arrow if you hit the target. So if you have advantage when Phantasmal Arrow hits, when the target hits, the arrow deals an additional d6 of damage of the chosen type. So it already does a d6 extra on top of your normal arrow. But if you have advantage,
instead of 1d6, it does 2d6 of the new type.
If you have advantage. So I'm trying to figure out, why does advantage trigger extra damage? And is this one of those things where there's just too much?
I would say this right here, especially with how it's laid out already, is getting to the point where it's going to be real hard to keep track of. Now, I feel like it would make it a little bit easier if it was the way I suggested a second ago. If I get to choose when I'm using Phantasmal Arrow, that way we list,
Right.
hey, I know I have advantage this round. I want to try and use it to get.
And it also says
to
it
double
does
the
stack
damage.
with crits.
Yes.
So if you think about it, that means that if it's Phantasmal Arrow and you advantage and you crit, you're adding 4 damage dice now instead of. So it's like, I get the idea and it sounds nice. Like it does sound nice on paper, but implementation wise, it's a lot of that if then this then if but if or, and it's like, I don't think that that's the best approach to D&D and tabletopping. Like that's more of like a.
This feels advanced gameplay. Like you guys have your shit down pat. You know exactly what you're doing. You know how to keep track of everything.
Yeah.
Or there's going to be a lot of discussion about, well, was that really? Could you really? Oh no, you didn't have enough, or whatever the case may be. So
yeah. So I don't mind the extra damage if it was on just. I mean, again, if you crit with your Phantasmal Arrow, I don't mind adding, doubling the damage die. So going to a 2d6 if it's on a crit, like that
Sure.
makes sense. But adding damage to an attack that has advantage, I'm not really sure how that mechanic plays. You know what I mean? I'm not really sure how that makes any sense. So I don't know why I would be adding damage just because you had advantage on a hit. I mean, you already have advantage to hit them. You know what I mean? I don't know why we're doubling down on. If you have advantage, why are you also doing more damage with this arrow that was already going to hit?
yeah,
There's questions that I can't answer as a DM on why that would work. So I think I wouldn't mind if it just said when you crit on a Phantasmal Arrow, it does an additional d6 of damage. I'm fine with that. Hell, I'm even fine that when you crit, it does both. It does a d6 of force and necrotic. I'm okay if that was like the crit option. But because I get it, if you crit when you're doing Phantasmal Arrow, like if it happens to line up, I get that sounds kind of cool. But I don't know about the advantage. I think I would take that away.
yeah. No, I'm not mad at that. Real quick, I just recognized something. In that note, it says only Phantasmal Arrows damage count as magical.
Yes,
But it
does
is a
give
plus
a plus
2.
2.
So does that not mean that any weapon, any arrow fired from it counts as magical? Because theoretically, any
Correct.
other plus 2 bow, anything you fire from it is going to be magical
So
damage.
it'll have the damage and attack, but it won't have the magical property. So this only makes its own Phantasmal Arrow. So it's almost like it reserves the magic for the Phantasmal Arrow. It's like every time you fire it, instead of it imbuing the arrow with magic, it reserves it to build.
But does that
up.
mean that it doesn't get the plus 2 anymore? It only gets the plus 2 on the Phantasmal Arrow?
Technically, it doesn't say that. It just says they don't count as magical, but it does say it gets a plus 2 to attack and
But
damage.
if the plus 2 is coming from magic, see, that's,
well, and then there's the question of, since it's a plus 2, again, you now got to think that the Plasma Arrow does a 1d6 plus 2. You know what I mean? Like, so you also got to consider, like, there's a lot of layers in this one. So yeah, it's not bad. I like the damages. I'm getting the idea behind this phantasmal string, but I think there's an easier, less complex way to do it to get the same thing across. But I also think that there's a unique way to do it that's not the standard 5e boring. It's going to just trigger whatever you want it to.
Sure.
So I think there's a better middle ground here that we could find.
Okay.
I do like the idea of doing both of these on a crit.
I do like that idea too.
Instead of the advantage.
I'm not mad at that either.
All right. So now we get finally down to the curse. This was caused by the fact that they needed to do a blood sacrifice to get some arcane knowledge
Blood
or
ritual,
ancestral knowledge in order to finish the bow. So contrary to above, if the attack that triggers Phantasmal Force, okay, so if it has advantage, it's going to do extra damage.
Sure.
The curse says that if you have disadvantage when the phantasmal arrow triggers. So basically, if you're about to fire and somehow you have disadvantage, but it also happens to line up with the time you're going to do
The phantasmal
arrow, which again sounds a little bit too controllable, because if I know exactly what, like you said before, you like that the fact that it's going to trigger, so you know when to make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
But what good is a curse if I can just choose to shoot the ground? Like,
Which is,
if I know for a fact the curse is going to come up and I can avoid it, it's not a curse. You know,
Sure.
it kind of, I don't think curses should be that easily avoidable. So that's just my initial knee jerk, is that if I know it's going to have a disadvantage, whatever it does, why can't I just choose not to fire? You know what I mean? But we'll see. So the Phantasmal Arrow deals 1d6 piercing damage to the wielder, which cannot be resisted. If the disadvantage causes the attack to roll a nat 1, it is treated as a critical hit to the wielder, which in this case, it does 1d6 necrotic and 1d6 force. Hey, that's what I said. It should do on a crit success.
I'm curious if the effects of the force damage and necrotic damage also apply to the wielder. Like, you cannot regain hit points.
I agree. I think it 100% does. So this, again, so let's say you rolled and you said it was every third round, right? So you know every third round, you're going to get this extra damage. But that third round comes around and you have disadvantage. So here's the thing that I have is, a lot of the times you have disadvantage on a shot before you take the shot. So if you just choose not to fire that round and not use your attack action when you know you have disadvantage, you could effectively never get involved in this curse, because the next time you attack with it, you won't have disadvantage.
So here's my question. It says the phantasmal arrow deals 1d6 damage to the wielder. It doesn't say if you miss, the arrow deals 1d6.
Yeah,
so that means no matter what, if you fire,
if you take that shot
while
with
you have
it's going to hurt you.
Now, does that mean it doesn't hit the target no matter what because the arrow's hitting you instead, or does that mean like there's?
I think you're still firing the arrow. The phasmal arrow hits you, so you're just not firing the phasmal arrow at the target.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So imagine I have disadvantage, but I hit my target. That phantasmal arrow does not hit the target.
No, it hits you. It still hits you regardless.
So
because you had disadvantage, the phasmal arrow hits you.
The way I was initially,
unless it's supposed to be both. You talk about both, like
yes, like I was thinking, like when you fire it, there's this like burst of energy that hits you and hurts you, but you still fire. But you still fire the arrow.
We have a hats off for Nugget because Nugget couldn't. Here, I'll give this one. This was supposed to be on during Sea of Thieves. So I'll do my
love it.
My captain's hat for y'all.
Let's see what we got over here.
This is for Nugget. A big old captain hat with my plumage.
Plume.
Show off my pirate buckles on my hat.
Yeah, I'll see those things slay. I love that.
All right. So it just says that if it triggers and has disadvantage, the arrow deals. Oh yeah, no, it does say the phasmal arrow deals the d6 to the wielder, which cannot be resisted. So it's not in addition to the target. It is instead of the target. So the fact is I know before I roll attack if I'm going to have disadvantage. So what's to stop me from just not firing the bow whenever I have disadvantage and just foregoing that attack and never getting the curse? Like,
yeah,
it really doesn't make any sense to make a curse.
Like, imagine you get poisoned. Your attack rolls have disadvantage, just period.
So you'd stop firing.
You just get a different weapon.
Yeah, like you would immediately make sure that you have a backup weapon, which I would guarantee to have a backup weapon when I have this thing. You know what I mean? I mean, hell, at that point, you could fire it until it has a charge and then put it away and then just wait till you needed that extra damage. So sure. I would, I'm thinking, like, again, first off, I really like that if you crit fail on yourself, it does both damages. I really think that should have just been, like, I even said that it should have been applied to the other one. I'm actually I think that's fucking hilarious that Cosmic added that, which I do like. But yeah, I don't think, if you know when it's going to happen and you know what's going to trigger the curse, I feel like it negates the curse. Because when are you going to be in such a dire situation that you're willing to take? I mean, I can understand taking 1d6 damage, but
Sure.
I'm firing an arrow. What's the likelihood that taking 1d6 damage to do 1d6 damage is going to be so advantageous that I can't just wait my next turn
And
to not have disadvantage?
And to be honest, it's like if I know that I am not gonna get the bonus damage, why am I using this bow? Because there's nothing about this bow. The arrows are non-magical damage. They only do as much as a regular crossbow. There's nothing special about this crossbow at this point if I have disadvantage.
It's just a regular bow. I
Like,
mean,
granted, you get
realistically-
you get the +2 theoretically, because
Yeah.
there's nothing in this that says you don't.
Yeah, so you still
But-
get the plus do with advantage. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is a regular bow that just does some magical damage every now and again,
Yes.
either to you or to the other people.
Yes.
But yeah, like, because yeah, without it making the normal arrows magical, you're basically relying on the phasmal arrow, the phantasmal arrow.
Yeah.
Which
Like-
again, it doesn't have to be the end all be all weapon. This could be a first level weapon that you ditch by level 5. But that's what's going to happen is by level 5, if I get a regular 2+2 bow, that's going to be better. You know what I mean? Like
I mean, the not having disadvantage is cool. The force damage and necrotic damage, what they can do, like that, just strategically being able to tell a creature that I'm fighting against, you don't get hit points back until a long rest.
well, it's only those hit points back. So I mean, if you do 6 points of damage, but they've lost 20, they still get 14
See, the
points
way I
back.
read that is it cannot be healed.
Let's see. So see, it says when this damage type is chosen, it cannot be healed. So the damage type cannot be healed. So I take that as the damage done cannot be healed, not the target cannot be healed.
See, I read it as when this damage type is chosen, it, i.e. the target, cannot be healed until the end of a long rest.
I read that as it as the damage type. Because there's nothing that really indicates. It says when this damage type is chosen, it, as in the damage type. I'm reading that grammatically as it is referring to the damage type. Because there's no breakage or, like signifier that it has anything to do with the target. So Cosmic, you'll have to tell us how you meant that to be written. Is it just the necrotic damage can't be healed? So
Also,
again,
I
if you
wanna know
took
what
20 points
level.
of damage but 6 of necrotic, I get 14 points back, or can I not heal at all? That's what we need Cosmic to verify, is what did
Yeah.
Cosmic mean by that? Because that's way different. Those are two completely different things.
Very much so.
Stopping someone from healing
Yeah.
altogether versus just preventing this damage from being healed, way different. Because honestly, not having that specific amount of damage not be able to be healed, nice. but
It's akin to reducing their max hit points
in that combat, in that combat,
Yes.
but not basically having an arrow that can like literally kill their healing. Yeah, that is
Like any healing below a 5th level spell, because greater restoration is the only thing that can heal
which
you.
means that is a combat changing ability. That right there could change the tide of combat simply because you can take something down really quick. So we need Cosmic to verify what they meant by that. Is it the damage that can't be done, or all damage can't be healed? That's a huge difference.
Interesting.
Because that makes it way more powerful, right? That makes that something that I would want to carry,
Yeah.
but as a sidearm. Like again, what I would do, again, as written, I would carry this thing on me, go hunting with it until I had a spectral arrow, and then sheath it and just chill with it until we're like, is it time? Is it time? He's about half damage. Bam! You can no longer heal the rest of this battle. That's what I would do. Why would I use this in battle when all I would ever do is because honestly, that's the best thing to do.
Now, again, theoretically, because it's that damage. Because if it was, imagine is the way that I was thinking,
Mhm.
right? Where you just can't heal at all.
Yeah.
Even if they're immune to the necrotic damage, if I hit you with that arrow, you can't heal.
Doesn't
Even if
matter
that
you do
arrow
damage.
doesn't do any damage to you, you can't heal.
That's what I mean is that makes it way more OP. And again, it's every time the bow was fired, not every time it hits a target.
Yeah.
It's so I could literally just miss on purpose, charge it, and then just walk away. Like that's the downside of this, is it's more of a tool than it is a weapon. I would not be using this as my primary. I would have this on my back, primed with this bow or primed with this arrow until combat. I don't know. You know what I mean? But we still need Cosmic to tell us what he meant by this. I don't know if Cosmic's still in chat. He should be. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. So I would definitely say the curse needs a fix. I don't think you should be able to get around the curse that easily. I think the whole purpose
definitely
of a curse
agree.
Is you know, I feel like
mundane items. So I was really curious if somebody could add an Artificer infusion to this weapon, because there is a repeating shot.
Yep.
Because imagine you don't need actual arrows.
Yep.
Imagine you could just, and I don't care about ammo. But
well, there is the quiver that does that, where, I mean, the quiver that just basically gives you the same shot over and over again. So.
Oh yeah. The what was it, the bottomless quiver or something like that?
Yeah.
But
so you could do, technically you can do something like that.
Still, that's wild.
I really feel like the curse needs to be reworked, because if it's just simply triggered when I have disadvantage, I'm just not going to use it. You know what I mean? Like you said, if I'm poisoned for a while, I should have a backup weapon. Like most, even archers usually have some sort of a backup weapon.
You know what I would say? I would say forget the disadvantage. I would say just period. Anytime you roll a nat 1 with this weapon, you take both damage.
I'm totally fine with
like
that. You shoot yourself. You basically shoot yourself with
a phantasmal arrow is generated and
explodes
and explodes on you, and you take both damage. And I wouldn't even be mad if, no matter how many times you had left to your next phantasmal arrow, it resets it right then and there.
Oh, gotcha. So
yes.
it literally burns it all and then resets your counter?
Yeah, so even if even if you had one more to get your normal phantasmal arrow and you roll a 1, boom, it blows up in your face, and now you got to wait 3 to potentially 6 more fires before you get another one. Yeah. That way it's still advantageous for you to use it, but it's still dangerous if you do.
You know, honestly, now that the more we talk about it, it should just be 5. Like, just call it every fifth shot. You know what I mean? Like again, get rid of the roll. I would say just every 3rd shot's a little bit powerful with what this can do. Every 5th shot, that seems reasonable. That seems easy. You know, that may be every other combat.
Sure.
You know, maybe single combat.
Maybe you get too often a combat.
Maybe, you know, especially if you started a combat with one. But I think every 5th shot would be better. I like the idea of resetting it if you fail. I like the idea of taking both damages if you fail. I like the idea of dealing both damages if you crit hit.
Yeah.
I don't mind those things. I feel like doing extra damage because you have advantage, I think, is a problem. Like, I don't think that really works.
I understand the idea with the advantage and the disadvantage. I think that there's again, like we were talking about, a more simplistic way to do it. And I like the idea because it's very much a contrary idea. It's like you get a really good thing if you have advantage, a really bad thing if you have disadvantage. But the problem with tying it to those things is, as a player, you can work around that whenever you need to, because you know what you can do to give yourself advantage. You know what you can do. You know what happens to you that gives you disadvantage, right? And if I can do anything where I'm like, normally I would have disadvantage, but this gives me advantage, they cancel each other out, it's a straight roll, then I just get rid of the effect of the curse. Yeah. And it never messes with me. So I definitely like the idea that, like, because this only happens when you get a natural 1 with disadvantage.
Yeah, it's even more so, like, likely gonna happen, but you're guaranteed to just never let it happen. Exactly. Whereas I want that to happen. I want the curse to be able to hit me. I would like to rework the curse to make it easier to happen. I would just say, you know, make it trigger every 5th shot. I still like the force and necrotic damage, though. I mean, I don't mind it. It's interesting that it's not radiant necrotic. You know, usually you get 2 sides of the coin.
Sure.
So force and necrotic is fine.
I'd say it was probably intended to have force, and the necrotic's kind of a byproduct of the ritual, kind of like. And so, like, I'm not 100% mad at that. I like that there was a benefit to it, you know, no restoration. And I definitely still want to know, hopefully Cosmic will get back to us about whether it was intended to be all damage or just the necrotic damage.
Yeah, just the ones that it deals. Yeah.
Now, would you say it applies to the non-magical regular arrow damage, or would you say that can be healed?
I think that can be healed. That's why I read it as it's just the necrotic damage that the spirit arrow does can't be healed. So like you said, it is more or less a permanent HP loss for the sake of that combat. Okay. That's how I read it.
I also think, I know you'd mentioned it earlier, that it was kind of powerful to have it ignore force resistance. There are very, very few things that are resistant to force damage.
Well, and again, it was only that way until I realized that it's 2 out of 3 magic power. So it's up in that range of, okay, well, I guess if it's nearly at its max, then it should be fine. You know, a level like a +1 probably shouldn't have had that. But a +2, I could totally get it. And then even a +3 could be immune resistant kind of thing.
Yeah. Or at least one of those things where it steps it down. Mm-hmm. If you're immune, you're now resistant. If you're resistant, you're now...
So this is kind of off topic, but one thing that this had reminded me of between the blood curse and the secondary string, what this makes me want to make now is like a similar one, but like an assassin's bow, where the second string is like ethereal, but it's also like super, like it like describes as like ethereal, but also extremely thin, like razor sharp thin. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of it. It's basically like your normal bow. Maybe it's like a magical bow can do like kind of like this, just does normal shit. But it also has its own like spectral bow or like a blood bow or like a blood arrow that you can fire, like a spectral arrow or a blood arrow that has its own things. But in order to activate it, you have to use the other string. And by doing that, you take 1d4 damage because when you pull it, it actually cuts you and draws your blood out and then uses that. So I was thinking about that when I was looking at the curse thing. I'm like, how cool would that be? Like a thing that actually, like, for you to trigger it, you have to take damage. And then I'm like, that'd be kind of cool for an assassin's bow. Just like
that, I do kind of like. Yeah. I'm not mad at that. So, although that was another thing. I feel like rogues are also usually archers of some sort.
Yeah,
but
why
yet
can't rogues do this?
But they can't mess with this.
I don't understand that. So I'm kind of confused on the need for an attunement too, because this was just an artificer's object, right? Like, I don't know what the rules are in 5th edition for like when it suggests attunement, but I don't really think a mortal tinkered object.
I don't mind the attunement, number one, because of what it does and the fact that I wouldn't want just anybody to be able to pick this up and start firing ethereal arrows randomly. I feel like you said, kind of, it is your resonance with the item that's going to kind of determine how powerful or how often you can do this thing if we're still choosing the amount. But I'll say the restrictions to the attunement, I would say is kind of where I'm getting a little, why is this what we're choosing?
Just make it attunement regardless of restriction.
I would say maybe you could restrict it to and maybe this is strictly because of the ritual, but neutral or evil alignments, maybe not good.
Oh, gotcha.
You know, something like that.
I could see that.
I know some things have alignment based ones, but you know, yeah. As far as the classes go, I feel like it's really hard to articulate why certain classes wouldn't, because like what about a bard theoretically? Like they wouldn't, I don't know. I feel like why not them is a hard question to answer. Question to answer
unless it's setting and lore specific, which again doesn't translate well to, well, why, what am I saying? It can't be done, right? Like, I can understand why you would want artificers to have it because it was artificer created. Sure. I understand why rangers would have it.
Sure. The guy's intent was, I wanted to be a ranger.
Right.
And I want to perfect this thing.
Archery fighter makes sense, but it makes more like archery fighter as a limitation only makes sense if this were a martial weapon.
Sure.
Because you would think that it has to be someone who could train in it.
Yeah. And to be clear, archery is not even a subclass of fighter. That is a fighting style.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So theoretically, anyone who can choose the archery fighting style, why not?
True. So maybe that's the
because paladins choose a fighting style. Who else chooses a fighting style? There's another one. Oh, well, Rangers choose a fighting
So
style.
then in that particular case, then we wouldn't really need to class limit it. Why not just say, limit it to anybody with the Ranger fighting style, or,
Or with the archery fighting style, I would say, because then
I mean, because
I don't think artificers get a fighting style.
Oh, okay. So it would take, yeah. So, and maybe that was the intent then. Maybe the intent was artificers because they don't have a fighting style, and then Rangers by default, and then everybody else was meant because they had a fighting style.
Although there is a feat that allows you to take a fighting style. So theoretically, anybody who gets to level 4 can just take the feat archery fighting style and then run around with this sucker.
All right.
Which,
not bad.
I'm not 100% mad at.
No. I
think,
wish there was just a better explanation to it. You know what I mean? I think that we're both on the same page of, it's not that attunement's bad, it's just where's it coming from.
Sure.
But I get you there.
I
get you on the idea that you don't want just anyone picking this up and then slinging the arrows.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say just that, just restricting it to the archery fighting style. Like even an artificer who wanted this would have to take that feat. I'm not totally mad at that. Because I have to imagine that this artificer that was trying to create this had that.
Yeah.
Like they were like, I want to be way better at archery, so I need to hone myself. So they likely would have gone down that road at some point. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
not a whole lot, but
no, it's a good thinking item. It's one of those items that I think is really good to get most of the creative juices flowing because it's going in the right direction. I mean, using a different type of bow is good. The use of the twin string is really nice. I'm liking the direction that the lore was headed. I think it's just a little bit too top heavy.
Sure.
I think we can clean up the lore. I really think that the curse, while it makes sense, it doesn't make sense in how it's being utilized. I would like to see, like you said, like, yeah, if it was just based around like, crit failing, but every crit fail is the curse. Every crit fail damages you, but only when it recharges can it actually damage, do extra damage. I'm totally good with that because like you said, especially with it resetting, it's like when you crit fail, it's like all the magic that was stored up for that phantasmal shot backfires and is gone now.
Even do the opposite for the other one. Anytime you crit, even if it's not on an opportunity where you would normally get a phantasmal arrow, one just happens.
Oh yeah, I would. I just say anytime you crit, you always do both damages. I would just totally be fine with that on top of its normal rotation.
I would also say, but even and this might be too much, but even on the good side, even whenever you crit, whenever you like positively crit and it does both damages and it shoots a phantasmal arrow, I would say that also resets you.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. All crits reset. Yes.
And
yes.
I think that again, it's something that, especially if we say that it's still something that's outside of the player's control, it'll mess with your
No, I like that. I like that a lot better because it's like a blessing in disguise, but it's like, oh, and you don't know until after you fired. So it's like you crit, sorry, the arrow's already out. You don't get to undo that because the next shot was supposed to be the one. So I like that actually. I like that a lot better. So yeah, change the crits to just do both damages to either self or target and reset the counter. Make the counter just a flat 5. That gives it plenty of time.
I'm not bad at that.
It gives it plenty of time.
It's pretty balanced.
But it doesn't happen too often. It's an easy number for everyone to remember. You know what I mean? It doesn't require any special extras or anything else like that. And then in terms of like the damage, I think we both said the damage is fine. Yeah, I think it just needs to be tightened up a little bit, and otherwise it could be fine. It could work.
Yeah, like kind of like you said, I wouldn't even be mad because this is a compound bow. The
damage going up,
mundane damage going up, like to like a D8 or even a D10 maybe.
Yeah, I don't mind it, like because he wasn't a full ranger. I don't mind it being like a D8, as in he didn't get it perfect.
Sure. Yeah.
But it should be better than a regular short bow if it does work as a compound bow. I also probably would undo the not undo. I would reinstill the fact that it is a magical bow, therefore all shots are magical. I have a hard time justifying that it's a magical bow that doesn't do magic damage.
Yes, I agree.
Which
I think
at that point I don't mind the D6 if you're just doing a D6 plus 2 and you want to keep it because that's basically a D8.
Sure.
If you wanted to kind of say he wasn't good at making bows yet, so again it's a prototype. These are ways that you can get around it. I do think it should do more than a D6 of damage, but I also don't like that we took away its plus 2. I personally just think as a continuity thing that should remain. Unless,
I will say this.
Unless you're doing the lore thing where you're saying that it forgoes giving your arrows plus 2 in order to charge. Because remember, it's every shot. So if you were doing that, if you were saying that you're giving up a plus 2 because you're storing that magic up to do the phantasmal shot.
Yeah.
That would be okay if the lore specifically stated that's why it's a plus 2 but doesn't do the plus 2. But without that, I just feel like why even call it a plus 2 then? Because then you have all of these extra things, but you have to remember all of these. Only the Phantasmal gets the plus 2.
I kind of like the fact that only the Phantasmal Arrows is the magical one. So honestly, the way I would probably run it is taking away the plus 2 and maybe giving it something extra to the Phantasmal, or saying when you hit your Phantasmal shot, see. Because then you have to ask yourself, okay, if it only happens when the Phantasmal shot comes out, then if I crit, does that mean I got a plus 2 to the attack roll?
No. So this is where what I would say is if we're going with that particular case where if we're liking the Phantasmal Arrow being the magical thing, then just get rid of the plus 2.
Yes.
Just get rid of the plus 2 on the bow itself. Because again, you're basically saying that when all of these things can happen on the Phantasmal Arrow, it triggers. But also remember, only the Phantasmal Arrow gets the plus 2. It's like too much.
Yeah.
Just get rid of the plus 2 on the bow and just say Phantasmal Arrow counts as magical. Done. Or give it the full plus 2 value, and because then I will always be adding plus 2.
Sure.
But if I'm only adding the plus 2 with the Phantasmal Arrow, then get rid of it on the bow and then add it here. Say it does a 1d6 plus. You know what I mean? Like,
so
it's just there's too many things I'm keeping track of when realistically it could just be.
This is just kind of like my headcanon. Like I always talk about like the immersion of the player and the immersion of the DM. Like when I look at a plus 1, a plus 2, like I imagine, yes, I'm pulling out this mundane piece of ammunition and I'm pulling it back to fire it, but like when I pull it back, it's almost like coating that arrow in some sort of like magical energy as I release it, and so when that thing hits, even though at its core it's just a mundane piece, it was infused with magic as it's going out, and so that's why it does magical damage. Now, if that's not what's happening, the only time I come back is when I pull it back like this and I'm on my Phantasmal Arrow, that the second one appears. Second one's side by side with it. They're both coated right there and they fly side by side towards the target. Like I love that vision, but again, only one of them is mundane and the other one is magical or mystical.
And in that particular case, I feel like it's just so much easier to just say the bow isn't magical. Like for the sake of consistency, because it's already doing extra damage. Why is it doing extra damage with extra damage? Like it's too many layers that are unnecessary. Sure. I'm not saying that a plus 2 or a D6 plus 2 is wrong to want from a magical bow, but getting there, just make the roll a D6 plus 2. Don't make the bow plus 2, but only when this arrow fires with the D6, because you're just basically having to add up too many things of if then, and don't do the if then. Just be like, when it triggers, this is it. Like you could go so much simpler with these with still getting the same effect.
After reading the lore and everything, I want to revisit the rarity real quick, because the rarity on this is rare.
It is.
It's not very rare, and again, thinking from a 5th edition mindset, a lot of the time that's just taking into account what is its power level, how strong is this thing. Now, we talked earlier a couple episodes back about what rarity actually means, right?
Yeah, in terms of scarcity. Almost.
Yes. So it's like, I would say based upon the lore of this thing, there's probably only one of these.
It would be legendary because it was an unfinished prototype that then got finished with a ritual. That sounds legendary because look at the legend that it preceded it, right? It
Right.
doesn't have to be uber powerful to be a legend. It just has to have a story that means that this thing isn't just any normal weapon, right?
Right.
I agree with
So that would be one of the only other things that I would look at and be like, I cannot see there being more than one of these. Like, especially because it's cursed. Like, you'd have to have the exact same curse on every single one of these that's out there, right? You know, like that's not, unless the dude that finished the prototype, or he was just pumping these out and maybe he didn't realize when he was pumping them out, or when he made a collection of these that they were all being cursed, or whatever the case may be, because they all came from the blood.
Only the prototypes lasted through the centuries. Yeah, because again, the curse was only because they used blood magic to finish it.
Yes.
Solely because they couldn't finish it. So it's almost like the bow can't be finished. It's almost like it's not possible. You need
the curse in order for this to work.
Like you needed the divine intervention, or the ancestral knowledge. You basically needed an otherworldly being to help you, and therefore, in its very nature of existence, it's not supposed to be. So that's why the curse is there. It's looking to. It's basically having an issue just existing. I kind of don't mind that. You know, I wouldn't even have minded something along the lines because of the lore. Now, this is more of a suggestion for Cosmic directly, not so much for the build as a universal build, as a balance, but almost for Cosmic directly, I'd almost go so far as to say the curse should only affect non-artificers. Because it was made by an artificer, by his artificer's ancestors. Even though he wanted to be a ranger, I kind of like the idea that fix the curse still. Definitely still fix the curse. But you could go one step further and saying the curse, because again, it's a party. You don't know what, unless you've decided, you know, what their party has to be made of. Mm-hmm. What if one of them isn't an artificer? What if someone is? Like, the idea that you could say it's designed for artificers, so it's cursed because only the bloodline will recognize the true rightful owner of it.
See, I'm not. If we're gonna go that route, and this would obviously be up to the DM, I would probably go the direction of saying the curse only doesn't apply to those of the bloodline, which is why the person who created it didn't recognize that it was cursed, because when he, in his experiments with it, like it never hit him.
The problem with that is you'd really have to be like, it would have to be that you knew that whoever played the artificer of the party was already tied into the story. Sure. I get that too. Another one, because I think this would be a fun thing to play with, because we talked about, like, you know, playing with stuff is fun. Play with attunement. What if it can only be attuned by artificers, but it can still be used by anyone? So unlike normal, it can be used to its full extent without attunement. It can only be attuned by artificers, though, and only those attuned do not suffer the effects of the curse.
Interesting.
But then you can even go one step further and say, once you've attuned to it, you can't unattune. Like, you are basically stuck with it. So the only person that does not get affected by the curse is the wearer and the attuner. But once you're attuned, it's locked. You are, until you die, that thing is yours. So you can go one step further there. And again, anybody can pick it up and use it at some sort of a detriment.
Can you use it while someone else is attuned to it? Or does it have to be unattuned for somebody not attuned to it?
That would be one of those fun things. I think anybody can use it, but then you make the curse worse. You make it to where it's like the person who's attuned to it, every fifth shot is empowered, and only crit fails hurt you. But everybody else, it's every fifth shot is empowered, but every other shot hurts you. Something like that, right? Where it's like you have to fire it 5 times to empower it, but every second time. So you have to get damaged twice before it will empower. Now, you make the damage like a 1d4 versus like a 1d10, right? You would make the spread worth it. So you can take up to 8 damage to do 10 damage. And yeah, it's like, why would I want to do that? It's like only in a super dire situation. But that's the point. No one's supposed to use it other than an attuner, other than an artificer.
Interesting.
So fun little thing we can play with in the future about attunement is doing things like that.
I do like the idea of attuned and unattuned being able to use the same weapon. Like, you can almost pass it around and be like, hey, we're here, hey, they went down, or whatever the case may be.
So I think a good analogy is Blade's weapon from the movies, when like the Wesley Snipes movies. Sure. Remember Blade's sword? when you pick it up and if you wield it for too long and you don't hit the button, the spikes come out and like shatter, like the dude's hand just like pops off. That's, to me, that's kind of like what this would be with attunement. If you don't know the weapon, it's gonna fuck your ass up. But if you're attuned to it, aka you know the button,
interesting.
So that's a perfect representation of what attunement is. Outside of like to me, that's a perfect representation of attunement. You picked up my sword. Go ahead, try to slap, bow, your hands off. It's like you try to use my sword and it's not attuned to you. That's kind of like a good visual representation of what that could look like. And so that's why I think like attunement could be a lot of fun, because that is attunement. That's an artificer's attunement. It's a little button that makes it deactivate itself. You know what I mean?
I really want to mess with this concept now.
I want to make a con man now. I want to make an artificer con man who states I can make attunement items. I can make such powerful items, and all they are things like that where he just hits a button and then gives it to you, so when it does something bad when you hold it, but when he grabs it and he holds it and he's like, see, nothing happens. I can get this to you. I can unattune it and give it to you, and you can have this attuned item, and then you just disable like the bad thing.
Sure.
And then he sells it to him. It's like, look, it's attuned to you. Like, you can make such a ripoff of someone who understands magic. I love this. Wild. Okay, we got to give this thing a score. So I do think it has a bit of work. I know Cosmic said that he wrote this a long time ago, so I do think that this could use a little bit of balancing. Again, primarily, I think it could be less complex in how it operates, and I think that the curse needs to be a little bit easier to activate. Like, it's too easy to get around.
Yeah,
and it's almost
less easy to avoid.
Yeah, so those are my two biggest critiques. Is clean up the complexity of how, like, the complexity of the lore and the complexity of everything triggering, I think is where I'm most hesitant with. And again, I feel like if I know the curse, I'm never going to have it happen. Like, I just know.
Yeah.
So
if you figure it out, like say you just don't know about it initially and it hits you once or twice, once you figure out what's going on with it, you're just like, it's never going to happen to me again.
Yeah. So those would be my two biggest ones. Outside of that, we've talked about all of the individual ways that we would critique it. But I think what it boils down to is just less complex and more straightforward, especially with the curse. Outside of that, I think that we've had a couple good options. I mean, again, I've suggested just make it a flat 5 instead of a roll.
Sure.
I think we both agree on the crits, both sides of the crits doing both max damage. And then other than that, just other than that, maybe just clean up a couple other things like the attunements and whatnot. But otherwise, it's a cool item. I do like playing around with doing specialty bows.
Yeah.
I have bows that do like specialty stuff.
And I'll say at the very least, it's inspired me about having things operate a little bit differently. Like I said, I kind of like its interval triggering.
Yeah, the interval triggering is a unique idea for sure.
I like the way, I like how it gives the players something to play with without necessarily giving them full control over it. But again, you get to choose. You know, like I said, I'm all about player agency, but it's like, where are you going to implement that player agency? You can implement it in a lot of different ways and places. You have the agency to not use the weapon if you don't like how it functions, but like, also, is its value worth what you have to go through to use it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely excited for some of the things that you could or couldn't do with it, and it definitely gives me ideas on how to make different things and play with different types of unique abilities.
Yeah.
So I'm here for it.
And just approaching it in a different way. I mean, I've mentioned several times that I've always loved the idea of doing a double stringed bow. I just haven't really figured out how I would want to do it specifically.
Sure.
But I mean, I liked the direction of the spectral aspect, like the phantasm bow aspect.
Yeah.
I liked that over just a bow that goes extra distance, does extra damage, or fires 2 arrows at the same time. Like,
Sure.
I'm liking this approach of incorporating the magical aspect. I just think, again, I think it could be just a little bit cleaner in order to be picked up by most people and have both player and DM be on the same page without constantly being like, are you sure you've had that many attacks? Like, I don't know. Does it go on this attack? Well, does it not trigger because I missed? Well, that attack got interrupted, so does it count as an attack? You know, there's a lot of extra steps there that I feel especially for like a 5th edition in most combats, I think it could just be streamlined. That's the word I've been looking for. Streamlined.
Streamline. There it is.
All right. Well, other than that, though, I think it's pretty good. So I think that it does need a bit of work. I think that for high point purposes, I think I do like the idea, and I don't dislike the abilities. I just think that there's a lot of balancing that has to go on here and a little bit of cleanup in order for me to be able to say that I could take this directly and move it into high point. So unfortunately for Kosmyc's average, I'm gonna have to give this one a 5.
5? Okay.
Yeah. It's not broken. It's just it's too messy for high point. It's too convoluted for me to easily fit it in. I would need to basically rewrite most of it in order for that to fit with my storylines.
Sure.
But that doesn't degrade the quality of the item. I'm just unable to use it as it's written.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Hecate, agree with you. Definitely a neat idea and concept. So yeah, definitely really, really good. I mean, I agree with Kage. The accommodation really deserves to be thrown at the fact that the trigger point is unique, and I think that we deserve to look at that a lot more. But how you want to go ahead and make something that like that really just comes down to, I think, thinking more from both the DM and the player, because they both are going to have to be on the same page, right? Especially with something this complicated, they're both going to have to. It's going to be an honor system, right? Because they both can't keep their own tracker. So if it's on the player, it's going to be the honor system on the DM of, I trust that you're going to do this on the right ones. And if it's on the DM, it's an honor system of, hey, I trust that you're going to let me know when I get to do my extra damage, DM. You know, like the DM has a lot to think of to not forget. So it's just a lot of back and forth. But cool idea, nonetheless. Really happy that we got to do it. Hopefully Kosmyc enjoyed the review with what he caught. I don't know if he's still here, but hopefully he enjoyed the review and got some interesting ideas out of it. Still really curious to see what other items he has thrown our way.
Oh yeah, I feel like Kosmyc has got a wealth, and I think they got at least 2 or 3 more in the chamber that are just waiting to come out.
No bad.
So yeah.
All right. Well, what does that bring Kosmyc's average to?
Kosmyc is still sitting at a hefty 6, right? Like they're above average for a lot of the stuff that they have, but again, they've had so many items reviewed that like a single review is not going to change their average dramatically. But
well, I know Kosmyc has at least 2 10s.
Yes, at least. So he's for sure up there. No, I'm definitely excited to see what they got going on in the future. Let me see. They have got, I think, 24 items reviewed so far.
Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Is it the most? Is that still number 1?
That's still number 1.
Still number 1.
Now I will say when we're finally done, Desmar is going to be coming up really close behind them because they have 21 in the queue to Kosmyc's 25 in the queue. So Kosmyc's only got one other item for us thus far.
Yeah.
That hasn't been reviewed yet. Whereas Des has got like a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think there's still more coming too. So Kosmyc, get that stuff in. We have only one more of your items. I know we're waiting on more dragon scales. We're waiting on more of those sets.
Yes.
So we've been waiting on those for months, years at this point. We've been waiting on those for over a year.
And they're probably around. Just got to get them in the submissions, man.
Get them in the submissions. I don't know when we lost ChillHop. At some point, ChillHop decided to
poop out.
Yeah. I don't even know. I don't really pay attention half the time to what ChillHop's doing. So yeah, not too bad there. Yeah, solid 6. That's pretty good. So I think what I'm gonna do now that I just thought about this, one thing I want to do with either the ADMG or one of the projects that we're working on, I think anything that gets a 10 out of 10 is gonna definitely, with author approval, be sponsored or be like highlighted.
Okay.
So like any reviews that we get that are like straight 10 out of 10, I think we could absolutely like represent those somewhere in one of the chapters or in one of the books of like, here's some optional feats, right? And like, here's some optional things, and just kind of throw that out there.
And then kind of like give them a shout out in the...
Yeah, give the author's like name and everything and all of that, but like be able to actually like show off some of this. I really
do like that. I like that a lot.
Hecate thinks they got one 10 out of 10. Is that true for Hecate?
Let's find out.
What did Hecate?
Where are you, Hecate?
And if you want to see your
Hecate
homebrew,
does have a 10 out of 10. There's Snow Serpent.
oh, the snow serpent. Oh,
Yes,
that's right.
their Snow Serpent that happened not too long ago got a 10 out of 10. Their Ice Monarch was a nice 9 out of 10.
Yep.
But yeah, Hecate's had some high scores. They've had some 6s too, but
Some
they've
bangers.
got some. They're usually, what is their average?
And if you guys want to submit your own, you can do so via the Discord. Link is now in chat. Submit your homebrew for review on Mondays. We would love to see it. New submitters get priority.
Yes, indeed. Hecate's average is 7 right now,
7. All right.
and they have the third highest number of submissions. Which not all of them are even in here, but they got at least 16 on this document. And I still have more to add for them. So,
Oh snap! Oh snap! Hecate, you're gonna have to snag a clip for Nugget just to prove that you did the hats off. I saw your post in Discord. You're gonna have to get like a screenshot or something to show the hats.
no hats. Sadness.
They were so sad they didn't get to do hats. Well, they weren't on the stream, so
What happened,
sucks
y'all?
to be them.
Wild, wild, wild.
What is next week's item?
Next week's item, I believe, is it? It is a Desmar. Des is next. We are doing a race
Ooh, another race
from
okay.
Desmar. This one is called, again, I don't know how to pronounce this. It looks like Diamond Dogs, but it could be like Diamond Dogs or something to that effect.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Let's go with Diamond Dogs.
Okay.
I like Diamond Dogs.
It's it feels like a humanoid wolf / dog type,
Or Damon Dog. Okay, so like Demon Dog, Damon Dog. Kind of
it's
like
something like that. Yeah. Like
Okay.
that's kind of what I'm thinking, what the intent was, but yeah.
all right.
We'll see what direction that ends up going, but
We'll see what the dog do.
yeah, what the dog do?
We'll go see what that dog doing. We'll see if we can pet that
Can you
dog.
pet that dog? Can I pet that dog? No, you can't pet that dog. That dog's a bear.
Can I pet that dog? Greatest. All right. Well, I will be preparing for this Friday as we will be doing another history of, where we will be talking about the history of magical races and what it means to be a magical race or be magical. So
No,
stay
that's not
tuned.
just humanoids. That's all things that are magical.
Yeah,
we're kind of looking
I'm
at.
gonna be looking at what has D&D decided and declared, or what they define as magical, because that was the whole discussion that we had last week. Was because traditionally most races in D&D canonly are considered magical races, and then that kind of it got into the topic of what does that mean? What does it mean to be a magical race? And so that conversation kind of spawned into, well, let's do a fucking history of to actually get the right information. So that's what we're gonna be doing this week, this Saturday or this Friday, is talking about what does it mean to be a magical race. Maybe that would be a history of being a magical race.
Or what does it mean to be magical? Because
Yes.
again, it's not just races. It's like what qualify, like this thing right here. Was this whole item magical, or the one that we homebrewed?
Yep.
The sword bow thing.
So I will try to do my best to see how much of that information. Maybe that'll be 2 episodes. Maybe one will be magical races and one will be magical items. Like,
Okay.
maybe we'll have to break it up. Maybe I'll be able to combine it all. But that'll be this Friday's topic. Hopefully y'all will be interested. And we heard what next week's item is. And then Hecate says, what is their next one? What is their next?
Hecate's next?
What is their
item?
next up and coming item for review?
On the list for Hecate, the next I have for you is your ice troll.
Wow, so we
Ice
had an
troll.
ice monarch, an ice serpent, and now an ice troll.
Now remember, there was an entire ice compendium they gave.
Oh yeah,
me.
that's right. The entire
And-
all of that was just for ice creatures.
And there's a couple that I'm curious how we're gonna do, because there is a a frost moth that theoretically has,
that has
two
the two, right, 'cause
forms.
that's
There's
the
like frost moth and the frost moth queen.
Right. We'll
And
probably do
so-
both of those together. I think that's what we decided on previously, was that
Yes.
they're meant to be kind of like an upgraded version of itself.
Mhm.
So it'll be kind of better, I think, to do those together, because then we'll be able to see the community, the culture of like that species, right? Like the idea of like its hierarchy. So I think it would be better to go together.
Although, now that I'm thinking of it, the last time we did Hecate's, we did the Icebound Sorcerer. And we found out that the Icebound Sorcerer is heavily
Isn't it a
connected
mount?
to a mount.
That's right.
So maybe we should do the mount
I thought that's what we
next.
were supposed to do. I think that's what we had decided we were
The
supposed
Frost
to do.
Twin-Headed Drake.
So that's probably what we'll do next for Hecate.
Okay,
because
let's-
we need to
let's do that one then.
conjoin those two as best we can. So let's do that, because what did we give the counterpart?
The Sorcerer?
Yeah, what was that one?
That one got a 6 out of 10.
But I think there was a lot that we didn't understand about how that was gonna
How much it
'cause I
combined.
think we found it too OP, right? That was our biggest like hold up with that one. Is it was a very OP, but we kept saying it's going to also have this other thing.
Was it OP or was it not powerful enough?
I thought it was OP because it was basically like it felt like the fight was going to take forever just to get to it, and then it had also another thing that you'd have to deal with. That's what I remember, but maybe not. It's been
I'll
a couple
I'll have to
weeks.
run through chat and take a gander at it again. But
Soul
yeah.
has a frost. Soul has a frost themed creature in their Ben 10. Well, you have like 98 monsters in your Ben 10 monster manual.
yeah,
so
I'm sure you have a fire based one. I'm sure you
it's,
have
it's not really fair to
an
be like
everything based
I
one.
created 100 monsters, so I have a monster theme for that. Be like, yeah, you're the apple of monsters. Okay, you've created them all. You have an app for that. You have a monster for that. We get it.
But you got to submit them, bro.
I know, right?
Let's get it.
A tundralisk. A tundralisk. Okay, like a basilisk, but from the tundra. So a tundralisk. I get it.
Interesting.
I get it. I get it.
I'm kind of down with those
I'm on the
vibes.
wavelength. I got you. I got you. All right, chat. Well, I think since the review is done, I think we will be cutting it here fairly shortly. Unless, chat, you have any other questions, feel free to rapid fire any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we will be cutting it for this Monday. Soul is working on it slowly but surely. They will be submitting them. I think they want to submit them all at once. I think they just want to
Fair
overload
enough.
you. I
Nice
think
little.
they just want to shotgun
Hey,
it.
I'm here for it. Give me something to work on.
Oh, and Hecate is also excited for their samurai.
Yes.
We've been
yes.
waiting for that one
Oh
forever.
my gosh. I haven't looked at it yet. Once we review it, you have no idea what I'm gonna be stealing. I've already, even though I already had a lot of how it was put in there, Cosmic's little what was it, a feat or something that he had, his reaction based
Oh yeah, the one that is the weird
I
thing
forgot
that
what that
DM didn't
was.
like for some reason. It was a fighting style.
oh, it was a fighting style. Yeah.
And for all of the things that he's made that are so fucking broken, his DM didn't want that one. I was so confused
That's so
because
wild.
that one seemed so fucking good. Like it was just for a fighting style, it was simplistic, it was straightforward, and it nailed all of the aesthetics and functionalities that you want. I don't understand why they thought that wouldn't be useful. Like, I'm still mad at that. Honestly, I'm mad on behalf of Cosmic
right?
because I can't understand why they thought a reaction based fighting style wouldn't work. And it's like, do you not understand martial arts at all? Probably not. Fair.
Quite possible.
You're gonna drop down 360 no scope 200 tundra pump with your creatures.
God
Kage.
bless America.
All right, chat. Any questions before we go? Any final send off questions? Anything you're dying to know? Or are we just gonna part ways and see you on Friday? And maybe I'll do some game streams this week. I don't know. Work's about to get really fucking stressful, so
Yeah.
I may be trying to do some game streams to forget about the world, or I may only be available for D&D. I don't know. So it's gonna be a fun next couple months.
Fair enough.
Again, no changes. Monday, Friday, we're still here, but either you're gonna be seeing me game almost nearly every night, or not at all. So if you see me, hop in and say hi. I would really appreciate it. Kage also streams every Tuesday. If you guys are interested in looking at some behind the scenes stuff, some coding development, anything that he's working on, he does those on Tuesdays. And of course, I do game streams throughout the week and on the weekends when I'm feeling casual and want to chit chat. So if you see us live, come in and say hi. We would really appreciate it. Otherwise, you can always join the Discord and join the conversation and join the community off stream.
Indeed.
Just the one thing, stay happy, stay healthy. Thank you so much, Hecate. You stay healthy, stay happy. I hope everyone gets a good amount of rest. I hope you guys had a fantastic weekend, and I hope you have a great week ahead of you. We will be back with our normally scheduled Friday D&D content at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on this Friday. Otherwise, I hope everyone gets some good sleep. I hope you guys are well and healthy and taking care of yourselves.
Amen.
That's going to be us for tonight. Have a good one, everybody. Cheers.
Deuces, my friend.